But I'm just starting the recording now. Again, this is a plan B with the phone because I actually usually have a proper dictaphone thing, and I just get me the questions up there. Yeah. So usually I start by asking about your background, or how you came to be associated with the language, or brought into the movement, so to speak.
So my background is mixed. My father was Italian, ex-prisoner of war, was imprisoned in West Wales, and he married a Welsh girl. The main language in the home was English, because my father couldn't speak Welsh, my mother couldn't speak Italian. But it was a bilingual home, a trilingual home in many ways. I was born and brought up in West Wales, in the same constituency as the first Member of Parliament from Plaid Cymru. So in my teenage years, I remember actively campaigning for Gwynfor Evans. I mean, at sort of 14 years of age, that meant, putting leaflets of doors, no more than that, and putting posters up, But I went for my further education, higher education. I went to university in Southampton and Reading for a year, and then I went to work in London for 3 years, while my partner then, wife now, was in college then, and then returned to North Wales in 1976, and I joined then Cymdeithas. Because I didn't, before that, I was actively engaged in politics, but it was student politics, CND, right to work, anti-Vietnam, anti-apartheid movement. As an activist, I was, fairly busy throughout my student years, and while I was in London, that continued. But I didn't feel I could contribute to politics in Wales while I was based in England. But when I came back, that's the first thing I did. And then for about 4 years, I was just an ordinary member. I used to go to rallies, open meetings, occasional conference, but I was unnoticeable, really, probably, And then 1980, I became more actively involved with campaigning in North Wales. Set up a branch there, and we got very involved in the annual sort of AGM, the Easter conference that we used to hold, and then began moving away from direct engagement in terms of, to paint out signs as an individual, but not in an organised way. I then began to take non-violent direct action in conjunction with specific policies and activities run by Cymdeithas centrally, and then I very quickly became very heavily involved.
And that was
mid-80s, so it was 85,
yeah.
86, 86, 87, I was chair. So 5 years on, I ended up not looking for it, but
And what type of what were the main campaigns at that time then?
Well, I mean, the campaign for the language rights still important, and was still an active campaign. And one of the protests, the public protests that we did have in the early 80s was pulling down road signs that were in English, although that's been going on for 20 odd years. It was the first, I think it was the first or the second time I was arrested, possibly the second time. So that was still ongoing. But the campaigns which became more relevant and of more particular interest to me was the campaign for control of housing and the property market, which morphed into the Language Act, which I was the Property Act, which I was very actively engaged in. So we had lots of activity linked to trying to get the Welsh language, recognition of the Welsh language within planning sectors, trying to get local authorities and national government to actually develop strategic plans to protect, support and promote Welsh language communities, particularly those who are under threat, and to prevent the continuation of properties being taken over as second homes and people being priced out of the local market. So the Property Act was all about trying to control, it was obviously trying to control the capitalist the capitalist property market through socialist principles, which ironically that's one of the main focuses. That was 80s, 90s.
So that problem,
so it's really frustrating.
Yeah,
that
still
we got some concessions. I mean, we won minor battles. We did prevent some housing developments, and we did, have strong arguments against the development of marinas and the over commercialisation of the tourist market and so on. But we just chipped away at the edges there.
and
So that was one of the main campaigns. And I was very, very actively involved in that for 4 or 5 years. And the other big one I was very actively involved in was revolutionising Welsh in schools and ensuring that the Welsh language got its was promoted, supported, and I suppose developed. Not just in the Welsh language sector, but throughout Wales. And ironically, that's where I'm still very heavily involved in.
And the education side of things, yeah.
Well, I was a teacher.
Oh.
And then I became a schools advisor and inspector. And then I ended up being the Welsh executive of the Basic Skills Literacy Numeracy Strategy in Wales. So that's my background. And for the last 6 years, I was actually, the Basic Skills Agency was integrated into Welsh Government. So for the last 5 years, I think it was, I was working with Welsh Government as a civil servant. So the level of my activity dipped. I never stopped supporting but in a public way. Obviously, when I was working with Basic Skills Agency, it was directly funded by Welsh Government, and when I was employed as a civil servant, I chose to be, well, I had to be really.
There's a rule, is there? They have
there
rules
is.
In Ireland where civil servants
yeah.
can't be.
But I wasn't a proper civil servant. We were brought into the civil service, so I frequently said that I am civil servant not by choice, but by what happened to the organisation across England and Wales.
Right. And then, in terms of the sort of different groups at the time you were involved with Cymdeithas, there was other educational groups working.
There were
unions, the parents, and
there was the Oifigeach, the Union for Welsh Teachers. There was Cydag, the Cymdeithas Ysgolion dros Addysg Gymraeg. There was, rhieni dros Addysg Gymraeg, parents for Welsh language. There was Cylch yr Iaith Welsh. There were others, but obviously the union and the Association of Teachers they had very specific briefs related to their membership. As a political organisation, I think we were way ahead. We were looking to change policy and to effect radical change. Looking back, when we got engaged in some things in the 80s in terms of education, it looks now to be in some ways naive, but yet it did result in changes. The state did do things, in in response to that, but not radically enough. So I think what we're doing now is far more radical and is going to be far more far-reaching.
So you would say there's even been a shift in how much you demand?
I think the big shift has been in thinking, in that a lot of the 80s, 90s activity in education was about ensuring that more young people were given the opportunity to have a Welsh language education, and trying to have a Welsh education system which was more relevant to young people's lives and was more directly controlled by the people who owned it, by parents, by students, and so on. What we say now is that the Welsh language is everybody's right throughout Wales, and our new thrust is all about making sure that every pupil in Wales leaves schools able to speak Welsh. So that's quite a big shift.
Yeah,
I
so
think it's not about being protectionist now. Yeah. It's not about ensuring that we have availability of Welsh language education. It's about ensuring that every person who goes through the education system is given sufficient support to become fluent. It's not about having more Welsh medium schools, it's much more than that. We want to see every school becoming more Welsh language orientated, with the ultimate aim of like Catalonia, of all schools in Wales being, primarily Welsh language schools. I don't like the whole this is me, not necessarily policy, Cymdeithas policy. I don't think in Wales we should be talking about Welsh medium schools, bilingual schools, and English medium schools. We shouldn't have any English medium schools in Wales. Pragmatically speaking, there are bilingual schools, but we should get rid of the whole notion of English medium schools, and we should be working on bilingual schools to become more like Welsh medium schools, and increasing the availability of Welsh medium schools throughout Wales. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, yeah. Interesting. And in terms of the numbers, then, I probably should have looked into this in advance, but what are the numbers of, say, English-only medium schools versus where's the balance like?
The Welsh government and a lot of politicians tend to talk about the numbers of people who have Welsh medium education in schools, but they talk about primary schools. So they will say that 22% of the children of primary age have a Welsh medium education, which is true. But if you go to the end of the state education timeline, 16 years of age, that drops to perhaps 15-16%. We actually lose people in the secondary sector. I would argue that it's been, perhaps for political reasons, they've used the statistic of primary schools because it looks better, both to government and to mainstream political parties, that we've actually made gains. But I would argue that what we've achieved in the 80s, 90s and noughties is stabilisation, and we haven't made major gains at all. And what we want to see now is a Welsh Language Act which focuses attention on something far, far more widespread and radical.
Interesting. And in terms of that discrepancy then between primary and secondary, that exists in Ireland as well. It's far more primary grades.
The thing that really,
why is that, do you think?
Well, it's because secondary schools don't want to continue. There's no continuity in education. If you go from primary to secondary, I'll give you an example. Cardiganshire is one of the most Welsh communities. I know it's 50-50 in terms of Welsh language speakers. 70% of the children in Cardiganshire receive, at primary age, receive a Welsh medium education. By the time you get to 16 years of age, 54% of children have young people do 5 or more of the subjects through the medium of Welsh. So the drop there immediately. If it comes to 18 years of age, it's 24%. So actually, as young people go through the education system, they become anglicised, having acquired the language. And then when you go to the post-16 sector, higher education and further education, the numbers drop dramatically. So for example, there's only the further education college that provides most courses in the medium of Welsh is Coleg Llanrich, the complex up in northwest Wales. But only 20% of their courses are through the medium of Welsh. The next to that is Coleg Sir Gar, which covers Cardigan and Carmarthenshire. Fully Welsh medium courses in the further education colleges in Carmarthenshire is less than 5%. Up to 40% have a bilingual education, but that bilingual hides a multiple of sins. What do we mean by bilingual? And that's not been properly defined. And then you've got half a dozen further education colleges in Wales that have absolutely no provision to the medium of Welsh at all. So we are failing young people as we go through the sector. So if you say, well, how many people do have a Welsh medium education? Probably the number, I'm not so sure, I think there's 15 to 16% of pupils leave schools at 16 years of age having had a fully Welsh medium education, which is less than the percentage of the population who speak Welsh. And of course, the percentage of people who speak Welsh is bolstered with the fact that a lot of these are people of primary school age. So you do have a situation where a lot of people actually lose the fluency in the language by going into schools that are either notionally bilingual or primarily English medium. So the language of communication in the schoolyard is English, and most of the education is through medium of English, and they switch codes and they end up talking just in English.
And they forget, so there's this...
And they say then, and then of course, we invest huge amounts of money in education for adults to bring them back to the Welsh language. So, you know, there are loads of adults who enrol in Welsh language courses.
These lapsed speakers.
But most, I don't know what percentage, but a very high percentage of them are people who've been through education system in Wales.
Anyway, yeah.
So our big argument will be with Welsh Government now is that why are we doing all these things? If we want to increase the numbers of people who speak Welsh, then we need to ensure that more people in schools. It's the easiest one. They're there for 12 years. It's a statutory subject up until 16 years of age, and yet we allow 80% of them to leave school not fluent in Welsh. It's totally mad. But then we have lots of money put into Welsh for adults to give them the opportunity to relearn Welsh. Now, we have had an influence because, a lot of influences, I think, as over the last few years. The Welsh Government has usually announced that all young people who are 16 and 25 can receive Welsh lessons free of charge.
I saw that,
for example. Yeah. Well, we're saying that all adults who want to learn Welsh should receive their education,
no matter what age,
free of charge, whatever age. That's our policy. But that's a big shift. That's a big shift. It's a step in the right direction. You know, we said that we want we want to get rid of the whole idea of second language. We want to have one continuum of learning, one continuum of assessment. That was proposed by an expert group. Well, not the second part, one continuum of learning was by an expert group of Welsh educationists back in 2013, and then quietly buried. But we've been very actively campaigning for that since 2015. It's been accepted, one continuum of learning. What hasn't been accepted is one continuum of assessment. So that's where our focus is on now. They've agreed to drop the whole idea of the use of the term second language. That's no longer being used now. It's teaching Welsh, but they have not developed one assessment continuum of learning. We've proposed a model which is differentiated. The Qualifications Council for Wales have produced a model which is different, 3 different exams. In other words, they're simply rebranding second language Welsh and first language Welsh. They're not calling it first or second language Welsh, they're just not using the terms. So it's 3 different assessments rather than a continuous line of assessment where people can measure the achievement along a line and where there is no ceiling to achievement. So young people who go from Welsh medium education to English medium education can't switch to an easy second language course and get an A star, and actually the facility in use of the language declines. They still get an A star.
So standards, you want to keep the standards.
We want to keep the standards.
Throughout
keep
that
the
continuum.
standards, exactly. But what we, particularly in the west and north of Wales, a significant proportion of young people, well, I'd give you the figures for Cardiganshire, actually the facility in the Welsh language remains constant or declines. But more critically, they don't develop the familiarity of using Welsh on a day-to-day basis socially, in social contexts and in work contexts. Now, I'll give you another really good example of a campaign where we've had some success. I talked about further education, and there's a big issue there. 120 plus million pounds is spent annually on apprenticeships and on education in the workplace. Apprenticeships are great, I think. I'm a big fan of apprenticeships. You learn on the job. Of that 120 million pounds plus, it's probably 140 million actually. I think it's 140 million now, and 120 million is on apprenticeships. Less than 5% is spent on apprenticeships through the medium of Welsh. It's probably close to 2%. They would say that 7 or 8% in addition to that 2% is on bilingual apprenticeships. But when you dig underneath that, the bilingual nature of the apprenticeships is very, very low. Now, one of the campaigns that we've been, and only Cymdeithas have been pushing this, that needs to change. And we've said, we're kind for 2 things. One, we wanted responsibility for further education to go to the Coleg Cymraeg Cenedlaethol, which was set up as a direct result of Welsh language Cymdeithas campaigning, and for them also to have responsibility for developing apprenticeships for the medium Welsh. And was it 18 months ago, 2 years ago, they've had that responsibility now, and 0.8 million was the budget that they were awarded, which is pathetic, but it's taking us in the direction of ensuring there will be more apprentices for the medium Welsh. Carmarthenshire employs 60 to 70 apprentices every year. I haven't got the figures for this year. The last set of figures we had, of those 60 or 70 apprentices, only 1 or 2 were doing their courses through medium Welsh. But 50% of the apprentices were fluent in Welsh and had come from Welsh-speaking backgrounds. So, the mismatch in terms of support for Welsh medium education and continued education, the examples I've given you, it's staggering. So, of course, if you do your apprenticeship through the medium of Welsh, if you do your education in the medium of Welsh, and you go to an apprenticeship and do the medium of English, and you go to the workplace, you're going to talk about your work through the medium of English. Yeah. We're actually Anglicizing a lot of our workforce by not ensuring that they have their education in Welsh. But what do? We give extra money to the Canolfan Dysgu Cymraeg Cenedlaethol, the Welsh for Education organisation, to promote Welsh in the workplace. Yeah, it's like, okay, let's allow 80% of our school children to leave school unable to speak Welsh. But never mind, they have a second chance, they can learn Welsh as adults. Let's put our money there. Let's continue apprenticeships and further education, or difficult to have them with the medium of Welsh. Let's give money to people to promote the use of Welsh in the workplace. And I'm not opposed to counselling. My daughter works for them, so I'm not saying I'm opposed to them, but I'm just saying what they're doing is peripheral. What should be...
It's not the core of...
It's not the core.
Yeah.
And it looks good and it sounds
symbolic.
good. It's symbolic.
Yeah.
It's a gesture, but it isn't radical, and it will not effect major change in the percentage of Welsh speakers. So whatever, I'm convinced that the next census results will show we more or less stayed as we are. We haven't improved much in numbers of Welsh, despite all the work that we've been doing.
What do you think that tendency for symbolism comes from? Sometimes
Well,
you do see it in other
politically,
languages.
it's a way...
It's easier, you think?
It's always, I mean, obviously, gestures and symbols require far less investment. You know, I mean, you give £0.8 million to a Coleg Cymraeg to develop apprenticeships in New Welsh. Fantastic. They didn't have it 3 years ago. They've now got it. But that's from a pot of 140 million. You know? It's nothing. It's nothing. But it looks good. It sounds good, and it appears that as if they're making progress, and they are. What is more important is they've transferred responsibility to an organisation whose responsibility it is to develop Welsh and language learning in the post-16 sector. That's symbolically, more than a symbol, that's a policy change. Now they need to back that up by a funding strategy, and they do back that up by putting far more pressure on qualifications authorities and on further education authorities to ensure that the educating side of the apprenticeship is delivered through medium Welsh, and the assessment is done through medium Welsh as well.
Interesting. And in terms of that, what you mentioned, the language of the schoolyard, or that sort of relationship between, you know, children speaking Welsh in school and then maybe switching codes outside of school.
What happens in school?
Or even in school when the teacher's not around, sort of thing.
It's in the corridor. It's a problem in Aberystwyth. I only know because I've got grandchildren in schools here. You know, as I know.
And what's is there ways of combating that? Do you think, or is there ways Well, of course, the media and everything else plays a role.
First of all, we just get rid of the whole notion that there are English medium schools. It is the responsibility of the school to ensure that the environment is fully supportive of the Welsh language, not symbolically supportive, not superficially supportive, but it develops children's abilities to use language, not just within the classroom, but outside the classroom. It means that when they have contracts with external authorities to deliver extracurricular activities, be it in the field of sports or the arts or crafts or whatever, that the people who get those contracts have to deliver through medium Welsh. It means that the Welsh Rugby Union and the Football Association of Wales deliver their training courses for tutors and for coaches through the medium of Welsh. You know, it's just Welsh should be normalised in all activity, and that's why I feel very strongly we should just get rid of the whole idea of English medium schools. So if you've got Welsh medium schools, which is a reality, and bilingual schools, which is a reality, the question is, how bilingual are those schools? Some of them, it's less than 10%, perhaps it's 2% currently, but they have to become 10%. The 10%ers have to become 30%. The 30%ers have to become 50%, and eventually they become fully Welsh medium schools. But that's, it sounds, I'm talking off the top of my head now. That's how I see it, yeah? It's not off the top of my head, it's thought through. It's thought through, you know.
Yeah. And in terms of, you mentioned that you have moved on from sort of just containment onto wanting to branch out.
It's not about protecting.
At what point did that happen? I mean, like, there was a fight to expand even the Welsh-speaking schools.
Because they would... That's still continuing.
Yeah.
Yeah, fine. We of course we need to continue to do that. And a lot of the campaigning in the 70s, 80s, 90s, noughties has been about increasing the number of Welsh medium schools. But it's interesting, in some areas the great success has come from, particularly primary sectors, not secondary, primary schools themselves deciding to become more bilingual and eventually Welsh medium schools. But you have a situation like, for example, in Cardigan, once again, I'm trying to give an example which you can relate to. All the primary schools in Cardigan are now Welsh medium primary schools. The secondary school isn't. And the percentage of people doing their examinations for Medium Welsh in Cardigan, I haven't got the exact figure, but I would guess it's probably less than 20%. But all the primary schools in that area are Welsh medium primary schools.
And that happened sort of autonomously, where they decided to...
And in Pembrokeshire recently, I got, my other daughter works in education as well, and at the policy level in Pembrokeshire, and across the Pembrokeshire, Cardiff, Carmarthenshire. There are parents in the Tenby area who have pressurised to have a Welsh medium school in the Tenby area. It's come, organically in some areas. It's not the direct result of a policy and a strategy to increase the amount of... there is, in theory, a strategy there, but the strategies that we see frequently reports on where we are now or we'd like to be, and they're couched in a language of generality, which means you can show that you've succeeded even though you've hardly moved.
And where does that, looking back or looking at it long term, where does that sort of organic demand arise from? Because there were points in the 20th century where,
well, it's because I think it's partly because of largely because Cymdeithas in particular, but not just Cymdeithas, have ensured that the profile of the Welsh language is there all the time. That obviously that's backed up by public organisations that are supportive of the Welsh language. Many of them funded by Welsh government, like the Earth, like the Eisteddfod, like Merched y Wawr, like Ysbydrec, all the things that we've sort of we are either involved in personally or we've been campaigning for, like with Ysbydrec or the Coleg Cymraeg Cenedlaethol or the Mentra Iaith, which have been set up across Wales, which are in part a response to our campaigning in the 80s for planning status for the Welsh language. All of these have ensured that the Welsh has a high profile. And I think that has, obviously, our members and have an influence. They may have lapsed their active membership, but they're out there. They have children, they have families, and they are part and parcel of the, of the way in which the language maintains its identity. But what undermines that is the Anglicisation of Wales by people moving in who don't have that sort of background or understanding and knowledge. Not necessarily opposed, they just don't fully understand it. So for every step we take forward, it's countered by something which happens beyond our ability to control. Like we have a Welsh language medium television channel, great, but the world now is digital. How the hell can we compete with Netflix and Sky and, so I mean...
There's large forces
operating
against...
Exactly, yeah. So that's why I would argue now we need to be thinking big about what we want, and that's why in terms of education we need to be thinking it's not about symbolic gestures and extra 2 million here and extra 3 million there. It really is about the aim must be to ensure that every pupil in Wales is able to speak and to communicate in Welsh fluently, and the sooner the better, but we plan for it by this date, by that date, by that date, So every local education authority has to there was a Welsh Language Strategic Plan. And that requirement was made while I was working in Welsh Government. I wasn't working in the Welsh unit at that time. I was working on the business skills strategy. But the last 10 years of strategic plans have shown that they've not been progressive enough or what's the word I'm looking for? Ambitious enough to effect change. What they've done is that they've reinforced what's delivered at the moment and made incremental gains here and there. And that's not enough, because we can't, the demographics are against us, you know. There are more people in the non-Welsh speaking sector than the English speaking sector. So by natural laws of demography, we're always going to be playing catch-up, unless we say, no, everybody. Welsh language is part of the rights of every young person in Wales. That is not, I don't think, what some pro-Welsh language organisations think.
You would say they see it as a minority rights issue, not a national rights issue.
Some of them are quite happy to see things sort of progress incrementally, have a few extra schools here and there, and you know, or as we say, no, it's for everybody in every part of Wales, and we need to get this somehow or other as soon as possible.
Interesting. And then in terms of, you mentioned investment, or lack of investment in some areas. How does that work in terms of the Welsh Government and its relationship then to Westminster or the political...
Well, obviously, the money Welsh Government gets its main source of funding is from Westminster, and they get the percentage for education and the percentage for health and so on and so forth. It's up to Welsh Government to decide how they apportion that. But I give you a really good 140 million for education in the workplace, of which less than 5 million goes to education in Renewable Welsh. Is pretty stark. You know, that's a massive.
And that's a decision made in Wales. To do which way that 5% goes.
They provide money for apprenticeships.
Yeah.
So my argument has been and I've had this argument with Cymdeithas, for example. You are the employer. You decide as an employer what apprentices you want to take on board, and you decide the conditions of the apprenticeships. It's no good saying, oh, they don't want to do it through the medium of Welsh. You're the employer. It's no good, you're employing a mechanic who says, I don't actually want to work on tractors, just on cars. You're a mechanic, you've got to learn to work in all vehicles, you know what I mean? So I think it's not just Welsh Government. I think money from Welsh Government nationally is apportioned to local authorities. It's up to local authorities to take decisions which effect change within their own local authorities. And I don't think they've been thinking radically enough. They've been content with maintaining the status quo and incremental growth. And they've not produced radical plans for ensuring that there's Welsh medication available for all pupils.
That's just down to a lack of actual radical people within those councils, or the political makeup of those?
I think it's a lack of vision. I think it's a lack of ambition, and I think also it's a lack of political will, because obviously if you do go in that direction, you are likely to have more conflict, and you will people come out of the woodwork, like the guy in the Daily Telegraph yesterday, who was a mate of Johnson's, was slamming with Welsh language, and it's a waste of money and all of that. The very narrow-minded English nationalism, which exists and is a powerful force in England, exists in Wales as well. It's not just an English nationalism, it's an Anglo-Welsh narrow nationalism that exists. But at the moment, it's fairly quiet. But the more radical we become,
the more pushback there is.
Yeah, but then there will be some pushback. Yeah. But if you couch it in the right way, I think that pushback can be met. I'll give you one simple example. 7 7 or 8 years ago, I was involved with the my other big interest is in, you know, planning. So we were campaigning with lobbying for change with regards to second homes, and we were arguing that local authorities should be able to put a tax on second homes and use that funding to provide more social housing and support for young people to purchase homes in their communities. Now, the lobbying was successful, but when we were lobbying, we were trying to get the support of local authorities for that, and they didn't want to know. Oh, it's going to be, you know, there's going to be huge backlash, and well, there's been some backlash, a lot of complaints, but actually people accepted it. But if you couch that in a different way and say, this is a tax, it's not a tax, this is a levy to support the local community. This extra funding we ask you to do will provide for you the network of services that will make your stay in Wales more pleasurable. But part of that bargaining is that we need to put a cap on the number of second homes that are available. We need to ensure that whatever tourist industry we've got is sustainable and it doesn't undermine the local economy and the local community. But that extra money is about, and this isn't really fully thought through Cymdeithas policy. This is because I'm not on that. I'm involved in the education sector now. I'm not in. But if I was in the planning group, that's what I'd be arguing for. That part and parcel is we need to rethink the way we present this to government. The good thing about all of this is that when the agreement between Plaid and Labour, a lot of things that we were arguing for in the education sector and the sectors are now part of the. It's actually part of the agenda, and the issue for us now is not getting them to come round to our way of thinking. It's actually make sure that what they say matches what they do matches what they say, because they've taken on board a lot of what we've been pushing for the last 5-6 years.
In terms of planning and education? In
terms of education, more perhaps in terms of planning, but in terms of planning as well, definitely, yeah. Yeah, they have. I mean, have you got that document?
No, I've heard about it though, yeah, but I can check it up, yeah.
A lot of the, and I've got my own copy, I think I brought it with me. Did I bring it with me? I thought I had. I have here. Like, if you look at the reference to education, for example, they have agreed to present a Welsh Education Bill as a forerunner to a Welsh Education Act. Well, that's what we're campaigning for. We want a new Welsh Language Act. They've agreed. They've agreed to being more ambitious and to establishing one continuum of learning for the Welsh language to enable our schools to move progressively towards becoming Welsh medium schools. They've not said assessment, just learning. So that's our big argument at the moment. But it's there. Yeah. It wasn't there 18 months ago. They've agreed to further support the Coleg Cymraeg and provide additional funding to increase the number of apprenticeships and further education through Medium Welsh, and to provide, translating here, and to provide free Welsh language learning for all young people 16 to 25 years of age. All things that we were pushing for.
They're all new.
They're all new.
Yeah, right.
They're all new. The assessment bit isn't there, and the amount of that investment, is it 0.8, is it 1.8, or is it 20.8? And the argument we were having about apprenticeships and workplace learning is that we're not asking for more money, we're just asking for a fair percentage. So that would mean, in terms of if 20% of that population speak Welsh, that would mean 20% of 140 million, which is a bit more than 5 million, you know. It's a massive jump,
yeah.
You know. So that's the sort of, but that sort of thinking is there. But, you know, having worked in Welsh Government, I know how easy it is for that to become watered down and to become anemic. So we, in terms of the Welsh Language Act, we've already put forward what we think should be the Welsh Language Act before it was done here. I haven't got a copy again, it's just my own copy, but we produced what we think should be there. And now we're not going to wait for them to produce an anemic version of Welsh Language. We're going to produce our own model and say, right, let's see what you've got compared to us. With assessment, we've produced a model of continuous assessment which we think is workable. And, you know, not being, because a number of us, we know what we're talking about in this education, because that's all we've done all our lives. I know what it, you know, we know what it is, what works and doesn't work in terms of assessment and learning. Because I've operated at quite a high level in terms of doing that. The model that's come out from the Qualifications Council is pathetic compared. It's just carrying on as it is, basically, just shifting words around. You know, it's not actually effecting change. So we haven't won that battle. We're going to have to fight hard to win that battle.
How did that come about, the agreement between Plaid and Labour that presented this opportunity for
because
change in terms of
the numbers of seats won by Labour?
It's the balance of seats.
It's the balance of power, yeah. It's the balance of power. And in order to effect a programme, they need to be sure that what they put forward will be passed by the Senedd. And that means they need more than one or two people, because every party's got rogues. Yeah. And you know, we know that there will be a number of people there will be a big pushback against many of these proposals by the right wing, by the Tories, but also by the right wing within the Labour Party as well.
Side, yeah. That's interesting. And then I suppose that feeds into the other question of independence and where that might be going.
Well, there's a huge battle there now, because obviously Johnson and the ultra-right-wing party that he commands are determined to undermine the devolution settlement, and they're determined to take back powers. They're not only going to take back powers, they're also going to undermine the devolution settlement by using the additional funding that they get by withdrawing from Europe to push forward their own agenda in Wales and Scotland and Northern Ireland. And you know, that's not going to be to ensure that all pupils in Wales become fluent Welsh, or that all pupils in Ireland, you know, learn Irish. You know what I mean? That things like that are not going to be on their agenda. You know, it's all about. They're going to be all about developing the British state.
Didn't they have a military state? A demand there to sing a national anthem of some sort in every school a few months ago?
What they have said is that they've called that's some individual Tory. Those voices reflect an opinion which is quite well established. Like every local authority has to fly the British flag alongside the Welsh national flag. You know, things like that, you know. The funding for projects which should come to Welsh Government for approval is the projects are funded directly by the Welsh office based in London, who have a different agenda. It's about, you know, establishing Britishness in Wales, and it's going to happen in Northern Ireland, it's going to happen in Scotland as well. Particularly if you've got someone like Johnson in charge. Yeah.
They opened up a new office even in Scotland, didn't they? In Edinburgh, this big fortress, basically.
Like. And they had one in Cardiff as well.
Yeah.
You know, it's about building up the barriers to prevent further devolution of power to the countries of Britain.
Do you think they're sowing the seeds of their own demise there, or do you think that they'll actually succeed?
I wish I knew. I don't know. I think in English nationalism, will either implode, but it will be quite messy, or it will gain in strength. It's, I don't know, I honestly don't know. I mean, I like to think that in Wales then we've got sufficient, the Labour Party in Wales now has got enough backbone, and actually the pandemic has helped to give it more backbone, as in Scotland and Northern Ireland, to show that we can take big decisions ourselves and do it better in England.
Yeah. Well, that's the big thing about United Ireland now. All the talk is that what the Tories are doing in Brexit has been completely counterproductive.
Exactly, it has. Yeah.
Maybe, hopefully, that's the case.
I would like to think that it'll make it easier for us to have an united Ireland. I would like to think it'll strengthen the independence movement in Wales. I'd like to think that Scotland becomes fully independent, but we shouldn't underestimate the power of the British state and the power of the massive wealth that lies behind the right-wing English nationalist forces. It's the capital, that they have access to.
The press, the media.
Well, yeah, and obviously that capital is spent by those forces for them to get more capital, to get richer, and they've done very well after the pandemic. The level of corruption as a result of the pandemic across the British state is incredible, and they're getting away with it. And biased, obviously.
Yeah. Very good. But I think that's covered a lot, yeah.
Good.
It's brilliant. It's brought us from the past up to the present. And
I think that's really important.
Yeah.
Because the thinking has to be more radical now.
Yeah.
And our manifesto for change for the next 10 years has to be more astute and strategic, I think.
Yeah, because I suppose the situation's so precarious, it demands a more radical response.
Yeah. I think we've won the battle in terms of. Have you got that document?
No.
That was produced about a decade ago. Carol might have a spare copy. But this is bilingual.
Oh yeah. It'd be interesting.
And the section on this was written, was it 2012, 2013? I can't remember. But I was actively engaged in this one. But it's interesting for you to read what we say about education here and what I've been saying now. And I think our thinking has changed a lot. But, for example, point 6 says, expand the functions of the Coleg Cymraeg Cymdeithas, conducted teacher training and post-16 colleges, and channel a high proportion of funds to it from these areas. That was, and it's in government document now, and there are a couple of other things here. Immediate attention should be declared to remove Welsh as a second language from the curriculum. That's happened. It's not going to be called that now. It's going to be there in everything but name. But that's, but these, I think this would be interesting for you to read after me telling you what I've said now.
So it's sort of match up with.
Well, just that it shows that there are changes that we've effected. There's no reference in here to apprenticeships, because at that time we weren't fully focused on where these changes could be effected. Actually, we were beginning to, but not sufficiently, perhaps. I don't know. But things change over time, obviously. That would be interesting for you.
Yeah.
And it would be interesting. You'll get a copy of the manifesto, the last manifesto we had, and I think you definitely need to get a copy of the. You can download this.
Yeah, it's on our website.
It's on the website. The Cymdeithas Gydweithio, the agreement, the working together agreement, the partnership agreement between Plaid and
there you go. Yeah. Brilliant. Thanks, Tom.
Is that okay?
Yeah. No, solid. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The whole mix of it there, not just focused on education, but bringing all the different strands together. Yeah.
Excellent. It's because a lot of the things that we need to learn.
They have to be interrelated.
Have to be interrelated.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Point is having